Friday night, not last night, but Friday night, as I said this morning, we were privileged to be able to start recording some of the main segments for the Solemn Assembly Project. Looking back, what took place, what brought us to have the need to have the Solemn Assembly 30 years ago, and what really took place in that Solemn Assembly. However, after it was over, we had fellowship with everyone for a little while, and it got to be about 11:30 Friday night, and got a few things around headquarters cleaned up, and we started headed home. We got almost all the way to our house, and Sarah said, "What was that?" So I stopped the truck, and I looked over and saw a glow. And we backed up a little ways so I could get a better look at it, and saw a fire burning. And first thought that kind of came to me was, well, somebody's having a bonfire. It's the right time of year for that. Sounds like a good thing to be doing. Wish I was up there with them. But as I looked around for a few moments, I noticed there was nobody out there. There was nobody tending to it. And I looked a little closer, and it wasn't a bonfire, but rather it was in the shape of a building that was burning. So I pulled up in the driveway and went and knocked on the door. And a little older lady came and opened a window up. And I said, "Ma'am, I believe your shed's on fire over here." And she said, "Do what?" I said, "I think your shed's burning down." "Oh, well, I'll be right out there in just a minute." And I asked her where a hose was. And she pointed to the hose, and I got the hose and was able to go over and help them out and get it pretty well put out before the fire department got there and help in this. The reason why I bring all that up is to say fire needs three things in order to continue burning. It needs oxygen, it needs fuel, and right off the top of my head, I can't remember what the third thing is that it needs. Maybe it only needs two things to burn. But it needs an ignition. It needs something to start it. And as I was standing there Friday night, we kind of looked around, and as I've told you all before, I used to run with the rescue squad. I've been on many fires, went through enough training with the fire department to know enough about what to do and how to do and when to do that I wasn't concerned over it, seeing the size of the fire and things. But the first thing that I did was I began to look around and take note of what was around the structure that was burning. Is there anything close by that's going to be hazardous? Is there anything close by that I have to worry about this spreading to and growing larger? Stupid old me. There was a propane tank about 10 foot away. But thank the Lord it didn't get going that way. But as I looked around, I saw that the trees that were around it were far enough away that I wasn't concerned about them catching fire. I began to immediately put water between the fire and the propane tank, try to make sure that was taken care of, and it didn't go in that direction. We were safe from that. And then I just began to put the fire out, Brother Nick. Began to keep working with it until there were no more embers, no more hot spots in it, no more flames anywhere. We pulled the tin back and uncovered some more and kept putting it out, just kept on dumping water on this. Now, what I'm wanting to get at here in service tonight is the fact that each one of us has a fire burning within us. Now, our decision is whether or not we want to tend to that fire, whether or not we want to let the fire go uncontrollably, whether we want to put it out, or whether we want it to burn exactly what it needs to burn. I heard it said one time, pastor said, we're not worried about wildfire in our church. There's enough wet blankets that we can put out every fire that comes in here. And I don't want anybody to get the idea that I'm preaching about wildfire. We don't need wildfire. Wildfires are destructive. They're something that causes much, much devastation, tragedy. Just a couple years ago, I'm sure you all remember, the fires in Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge and the millions of acres that were burnt, the people that lost their lives in the midst of these fires because it was uncontrolled. It was something that had no purpose, no benefit to it. It wasn't something that was tended to. It wasn't something that they could control and maintain, but it got larger than what they were able to handle. But then on the other side of things, I don't know about you, but I've had plenty of bonfires in my life. In fact, my dad and we had probably about a half acre of brush in our backyard at the house where I grew up. And that's what we did, was we got back down in there and we cut trails in it, and we cut circles in it and paths that would stop, that would be a fire line, act as a fire line, and then we burn it back to that so that we could clear out some of that brush. We used fire to help us in what we needed to get done. I've had enough bonfires that I enjoy sitting around a bonfire and enjoying company with other people and enjoying fellowship with one another. In our house in Covington, we had a wood stove that we used in that house, and it really became our primary source of heat. And we loved the heat that fire would produce, that it would come and it would not just keep us warm, but it was just almost as if it would come and give us a hug, Brother Nick. It was just a special kind of heat. But it took tending to that fire. It was controlled. It wasn't something that we allowed to just have its way and ravage through us and do what the destruction that it wanted. But it was something that we tended to and worked toward. Now on the other side, as I said, I've been on so many fires with the rescue squad and different things that I have seen fires extinguished as well. And I've been on both sides of it. Some that people were happy for us to come and put out, and some that people were aggravated at us because we put them out. Whether they were trying to burn their homes down or whether they were trying to have a bonfire and we ruined their fun, whatever the case may be, they got mad at us for it. But as we're getting ready to enter into a new year coming up here in just a little bit, we're going to have a revival to start off that year. I want us now to begin to prepare and work the fire, tend to the fire within us. Because, Brother Nick, the thing about fire is, just as I said, the first thing I did was look around at what was around it. If you get a fire burning hot enough, it's going to spread. That's just the way it works. That's the way it burns. That's the way it does things. And if I'll begin to tend to my fire in my body and my soul and allow the Lord to begin to work on me, then I can spread that fire to you, Brother Nick. And it can spread to Brother Jason and Brother Rick. And it can spread to Brother Chris and Sister Wendy and Sister Parton and Sarah and Sam. And this whole church can be set on fire, ready to work for the Lord. And when revival comes, we can be burning so hot, so brightly for the Lord, that it begins to spread around us, that the community sees there's something going on here that they want to take part of. That's something coming from within, not me and you, but the Spirit of God setting down on us can be something that will draw them to also want to receive this fire. But it's not going to come from just going through service after service after service. We can have, I've said this before, we can have 5 million church services. And if all we did is come in to say that we were having church, we'll never get anything out of it. We'll never grow. We'll never get encouraged. We'll never get set on fire. But if we'll come together and we'll allow the Lord to work. You see, the thing about it is, I've also worked with forest fires and gone on the scene of forest fires. Been able to be there with them and watch as the firefighters went in and tried to put these things out. And many times, what they would do is they would backburn. They would go into these areas and they would find this place away from where the fire was, but in the direction that it was headed. And they would start a new fire and push it back towards the fire. As I said at the beginning, fire has to have fuel in order to burn. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to take away that fuel that it cannot burn any longer. It gets to a point that it can't go forward anymore. Now, church, I really hadn't even thought about this aspect of it until just now. The world that we live in is trying its very best to take away the fuel that we have. To take away any encouragement that you have. To take away any excitement that you have. To take away the very hope of Jesus Christ. But I remember one fire in particular back in Virginia. They were fighting and they began to backburn. Try to push it back. Try to keep it from going into a community and destroying people's homes. And once they started the backburn fires, the wind changed directions. They weren't expecting this. The weather hadn't planned for this. It was completely something that took them by surprise. But when the wind changed directions, that fire didn't accomplish what they were trying to make it accomplish. But rather, it fueled the other fire and made it grow larger and made it progress faster and go into this community. And it did destroy many homes. Church, I don't know what you feel. I don't know how encouraged you've been, how discouraged you've been. But what I do know is we still serve the God that controls the wind. And it doesn't matter what the devil tries to start burning back to take away our fuel. The Lord can use that to grow the fire, to increase, to get it burning hotter than it ever has before, and to go out and minister to others. 2 Timothy, the 1st chapter. Paul was talking to Timothy here, and starting at the 6th verse, he says, "Wherefore I put thee in remembrance, that thou stir up the gift of God which is in thee by the putting on of my hands. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Be not thou therefore ashamed of the testimony of our Lord, nor of me his prisoner, but be thou a partaker of the afflictions of the gospel according to the power of God." Churches, we're getting ready to go into this revival as we're preparing for a new year. Stir up the gift that is in you. When you burn wood as your source of heat, it took me about the first 2 years we lived in that house to really figure out how to do it right. You can't just throw a match in it and let it burn and it work the way it needs to work. But you've got to get the kindling going. and get it hot. And then put some wood on top of that and build your fire in such a way that it burns hot, but it burns slowly. And that it can last a little while. And you've got to tend to it. You've got to come back in a couple hours and put some more wood on it. In the first couple years, I'd wake up every morning in the winter and I'd be freezing half to death. And I'd get so mad because I had just the perfect fire going the night before. I had worked all day getting that thing just right, and it was burning hot, and it was going good, and we'd go to bed and it'd be 80 degrees in the house, and we'd wake up and it'd be 60 degrees in the house. But what I'd have to do is I'd have to go to that wood stove, and I'd have to open it up, and I'd have to get down in the coals, and I'd have to begin stirring it up, getting some of those hot coals back on top again, and then begin putting the small wood on it and feeding it. You see, I found out real quick it was a whole lot easier to just get a fire going again than it was to try to start a brand new one. Normally, when I had to start a new fire, when we had been gone for a few days, or we had let it go out, or the first fire of the year, or however the situation calls, it'd take about an hour of working with it and staying right on top of it, and getting that small kindling going and stoking it and blowing on it and having a few prayers along the way that the Lord will get this thing going to really get it going. But in the mornings when I'd get up and I'd have those hot coals still in there, it may not be putting off the heat that I wanted it to, but if I'd stir it up just a little bit and get those coals exposed, and then I'd take some smaller wood and I'd throw on it, I didn't have to do anything. Those coals would just ignite that fire and it would begin to burn. And then in a few minutes I could come back by and I could put a bigger piece of wood on it, and it would start burning and it would start producing that heat and heating the house back up. Church, don't let your fire go out. We're getting ready to enter into a new year. There's going to be new problems along the way too. Guess what? It's just life. We're going to find good things. Hey, praise God. 2022 is going to be over and 2023 is going to start. And guess what? Thank the Lord, it's not 2020 all over again. But the truth and reality of it is, for all we know, COVID-23 might be sitting right around the corner. And it may cause our world to turn upside down yet again. We don't know. But what I do know is if that will tend to the fire now. It doesn't matter if COVID-23 comes. It doesn't matter if Russia sends a nuclear bomb over here. It doesn't matter what may happen. We can see God burn within us so mightily that we can make a difference in this community, that we can make a difference in our families, that we can see the glory of God come and begin to work on us and begin to shine through us. That song that I sang, "O Beautiful Star of Bethlehem," the second verse says Jesus is now that star divine. Brighter and brighter he will shine. The reason why we stopped at that fire Friday night, the truth of it is, I'm not trying to say this to pat myself on the back, because the truth of it is that fire probably would have burned itself out in just a few minutes. The damage that was going to be done had already been done. 2 poor chickens lost their life that night. Didn't even get to eat them either along the way. The chicken coop that was burning had already been burnt. It was a loss. It wasn't going to be able to be repaired. And as I said, there wasn't really anything around it that I feared that it was going to spread. So it probably would have burned itself out. But you know, coming home, we didn't stop because we smelt smoke. We stopped because we saw a light. Church, we have been sitting here smoldering for years. And I don't just mean us here at Southside. I've not been here for years. I can't make that statement. But we in the church of God have been sitting smoldering, smoking for years. We still have the heat, but the flame's not burning brightly. But if we'll tend to it now and we'll begin to stir it up, we can see that flame start to burn and it start to glow, and people around us are going to start taking note of it. Mom and Dad always told Chelsea growing up, if you ever get in trouble, don't run out in the streets and scream for help. Don't run out in the streets and scream that somebody's trying to attack you or any of these things. Run out in the streets and start screaming fire. Nobody wants to be involved if somebody's getting mugged or robbed or any of these things, but everybody wants to come around and watch a fire burn. Church, the world wants to see a fire. And when they see it burning, not just smelling the smoke. Brother Nick, you said something here when we came in tonight about smelling that wood burning stove, that wood smoke outside. Somebody's heating their home with it. And did you say you liked it or you didn't like it? You did like it. It's something comforting about that smell. But they've got to see more. They've got to do more than smell the smoke. They've got to see the flame. And if we'll tend to it, if we'll stir it up, the Lord's faithful. He's not forsaken us. He's not forgotten us. But He's faithful time and time again to come and be exactly what we need and give us what we need in the very moment that we ask. Stand with me tonight, church, if you would.